Hello and welcome to the Starfish and Coffee podcast, where we get a good soaking in pop culture of all kinds. My name is Sean Smith and I've been a pop culture writer for about 30 years. Some of you might know me from creating and being the editor of Burn magazine, or more recently as the editor of Skin Deep Tattoo magazine. Thanks for stopping by. In this first episode, I talked to one of my oldest friends, JJ, who has been with me on many adventures, but is most well known for being the premier DJ at the Crazy House in Liverpool for a huge 25 years. I decided to kick off this season with one of our infamous kitchen table chats about dead rock stars, just to see where we might end up. So let's get it on and you can decide for yourself. So this is our first episode of Starfish and Coffee. I've got some ideas for the future as well, but today we're going to talk about dead rock stars, right?
Right, indeed.
And why we tend to listen to them after they're dead more than when they're alive. But that was kind of a week ago, and I was thinking about it, and I thought, wow, I'm not sure I do. You might, and I kind of get why people do, but I'm not sure I do. So I'm gonna throw into the arena that when Chris Cornell died, which is probably the most meaningful one to me, I don't think I could have listened to him any more afterwards than before. It didn't increase my curiosity, but also I got to go back in time, and I guess it depends what kind of a person you are. But like when Gary Holton died, for anyone who's never heard of him, he was with Heavy Metal Kids, and I knew him, of course, from Auf Wiedersehen Pet, because I would have been about 16, something like that. So I completely missed the band first time round, but when he died during the filming of that, I was curious because he looked like a punk, and that did actually make me go to the record store and buy some Heavy Metal Kids albums, because back in the day that's what you had to do, right? You couldn't jump online and go, I'll check out what they're like. You had to go out and spend 10 quid, and sometimes they sucked and sometimes they didn't, but where'd you come from with that?
Well, yeah, I kind of agree, but I think maybe over the last few years it's become a bit more prevalent. I mean, I'm reminded of it again this weekend. Mark Keds died from the Senseless Things.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing them, so many times in little clubs and playing with bands, and so I was and because there's so much music, and maybe this is part of it as well, because there's so much music, I kind of needed to remind myself what the Senseless Things sounded like. And so I wanted to kind of go and kind of see how much I knew and how much I remembered. And this is going to sound really shit, really, for saying this about someone who's departed, but how much of a fan was I? Does that make any sense? I mean, with Bowie, it's obvious. I mean, everything backwards because you've heard it a million times. But there's a lot of artists that like Mark Keds is a classic example of that I went and listened to, and I thought, what, they were good then. Maybe I should have listened to them more. But at the time, they were, at any time at the age you are, so much going on that they kind of were in the first division, if you like, of bands that I wanted to see, and certainly not in the Premier League of the acts I wanted to go and see live. But
that's a good point.
Did rediscover a lot of great tunes, Yeah.
I mean, it's just strange because what sort of year is the Senseless Things?
Oh, we're talking kind of late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. So back then,
Sisters of Mercy,
right? Yeah, but your whole music existence at that point is based on having actually invested cash in what you were into. So
yes,
in that month you'd spend maybe 40 quid on 4 albums, and that was your investment, and it was very rare that you ever got out of your box in a big way to investigate things like you can now.
Yeah,
it's just so easy now.
Talking about previously for me, because because now I obviously could just open YouTube and type it in, and boom, there's a whole bunch of live stuff, a whole bunch of videos. Some I'd seen, some telly appearances, and full albums, and I could just go click, 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 click. Here's a load of stuff, and you've typed into something there that back before the net was doing that, we would have to have gone out and bought that record. And as you rightly said, when I bought the Cult album and the Balaam and the Angel album and blah, 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 there wasn't enough money left.
But the point here is also that you and me have been friends for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And we weren't really buying different things from each other.
No.
We were kind of buying the same kinds of things. So, and our friends were too, our other friends. So it was very occasional that you'd find someone who'd bought the Senseless Things album.
Yes.
And to be honest, for me, I would have gone, nah, sounds like shit. And I wouldn't have bothered because there was other things that, well, we were so used to listening to an album hundreds of times because that's what you did, that you never really got out of your box anyway.
Yeah.
And you're only shot at hearing, like, I'm aware of the Senseless Things, never really got into them, but your only shot there was if they were on Top of the Pops or the Tube.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or
EC2 perhaps in our case.
Yeah. God. Too long ago.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean.
I do, totally.
A crap TV show like that, we probably discovered so many bands through that TV show that we probably would never have listened to. I mean, I can't say I would have picked up a Torme album because, but when they were on ECT, I was suddenly blown away. So, again.
Well, there's another guy I was going to bring up because when he died, which is, last year maybe? Yeah, last year.
Yes.
I did actually go, wow, Bernie Torme. I was knee deep in Bernie Torme when he was with Phil Lewis in the Back to Babylon album. That was great. Desperado, obviously, we have our history with Desperado.
Yes.
That was a great album. And when he died, I did go back and dig it all up. And I can honestly say, I probably haven't listened to Bernie Torme since 94-ish. So there's a good 16, 17, 18 years that I never even listened to him until he died. So I stand corrected.
That's the flip side of the coin.
Yeah.
You've hit your flip side of the coin there completely because you actually have gone and thought, oh yeah, let me listen to some of this to A, remind myself how good it was, and B, see what else I've missed.
Yeah, and it's a strange thing, the old death thing, because here's an odd one: Linkin Park and Chester. I never got on with Linkin Park, and it kind of bypassed me a bit, and I didn't go back. I haven't gone back to see what it was all about. But that's a bit peculiar to me, maybe, because I know when people go, "Oh, this band are great," and I'm not into them, I just walk away and go, I'll find my own great thing. So I think I suffer a little bit, not denying his talent or anything. I was more excited when he joined, what's Scott's band? Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh yeah.
That worked for me, but Linkin Park, not so much. But so I guess it depends how you identify with these guys. Bernie Torme, we kind of grew up with, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you're now tapping into we're tapping into relevance here. For you, Linkin Park, you've already said for me being in a nightclub and DJing in an alternative rock nightclub, obviously Linkin Park was a massive part of that.
Yeah.
And seeing every week, there was not a week went past from that debut album in 2000. There wasn't a week that went past that I didn't play a plethora of Linkin Park songs ever.
Yeah.
And seeing them at festivals, and actually seeing them open for the Deftones on their first ever tour. So for me, there was a completely different thing. And of course, Chester had got heavily involved in Love, Hope, Strength. And for the listeners, that's a kind of rock and roll charity, cancer charity. And that Mike Peters from The Alarm started up. And Chester got very, very heavily involved in supporting it and was great with us and gave us a lot of his time and a lot of music. So again, for me, that was a lot closer to my life in a personable way than just, for you on the outside and just being, I've checked them out, not really for me, not asked.
Yeah, yeah. Just out of interest, how did Chester get involved with Love and Hope?
Well, it's one of them. He's just one of them blokes that he used to turn up. I mean, the beauty with the Love, Hope, Strength thing is because when they're all when they're out in Los Angeles with Slim Jim, who obviously is the drummer from the Stray Cats.
Yep.
They go out to the clubs and then there's jam sessions with Billy Duffy from the Cult and blah blah, and they all get together. And obviously, at these times, at these bars, there's other, I guess, rock stars,
Yeah.
And people then get kind of dragged in, and I guess it's a bit like you and me. If we went out to a club tonight and I was asked to play and you were asked to play, and we said to them, what are you doing? What's this for? And somebody said for Alzheimer's or Save the Whales or whatever. We'd go, well, give me some more information on that because that's something I'm passionate about. And that's how a lot of people come to it in many respects. That almost backdoor.
Yeah.
Artist,
Yeah. I mean, I've made that sound like I didn't have time for Chester, but I did have time for Chester, and
of course,
I've got quite my link with Chester comes from his association with Club Tattoo in Vegas,
right?
So which he co-owned with Sean Dowdell, but it was a weird sort of, oh yeah, this is Chester from Linkin Park, and I didn't care. He was more at the time. He was more important to me as the guy that launched this great tattoo studio than he was as this singer. So I understand his relevance and everything, and it was very sad. I mean, the parallels with Cornell were weird too. That was a whole different ball game. I wouldn't want to get into that.
But again,
go on.
No, you've hit the relevance button again. Like I say, for me, the relevance because of running a club venue was my side. For you, it was tattoo because you were editor of the number one tattoo magazine in the country at the time. So for you, that it's still relevance, isn't it, to where you are at the time?
I guess so. Yeah, totally. I mean, there's I don't know, the dead rock star thing's weird, isn't it? It's kind of like, for me, it's almost like Prince isn't dead.
Yeah,
I've not really taken that on board. He's such a big star that it doesn't affect me sort of on an emotional level like the Bowie thing did, where you grow up with him in a different way.
Yes.
It's like Michael Jackson. I never went back to listen to Michael Jackson, that's for sure, but he kind of like if somebody said the joke's on you, he's still alive, we'd all probably go, yeah, okay, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because you get to a certain level where you're too big, and things don't mean the same. Whereas if you bring them back down to a level you can comprehend, like a good one for me is Nick Marsh from Flesh for Lulu.
Yes.
They were never huge. I loved them. I mean, back when we were in our, I don't know if you could call it alt rock or alt pop. It was just alternative back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But they were a great band, And when he died, nobody even freaking noticed. And if you're a Flesh for Lulu fan now and you're listening to this, odds are that you didn't know that. Which is kind of sad too.
Well, I do see that a lot. I recently saw some photos online of obviously, being a huge fan of Hanoi Rocks back in the day,
Mm.
and obviously late December is the anniversary of the death of Razzle. And for listeners, Razzle was the drummer. He got killed by Vince Neil from Motley Crue. And if you watch the Dirt documentary on Motley Crue, there's a bit in there where the accident happens and Razzle dies. And Hanoi Rocks, of course, split up and went their separate ways. But Michael Monroe, who's the singer of the band, shared some photographs of himself, like from the Sun City period. And again, Sun City, Little Steve Van Zandt from Springsteen. For anybody who doesn't know who he is, did a song called Sun City. And in those pictures was Joey Ramone from the Ramones and Stiv Bators, from the Dead Boys and Lords of the New Church. And there was a lot of people that were coming on it that were actually commenting, I wonder what Stiv's up to now.
Yeah, not a lot.
and you do tend to sit there and go, that can't be that. Is that a real comment?
I mean, Stiv must have died in early 90s, maybe.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah, but I do see that a lot, and I guess even more so, strangely enough, with bands that keep going. I mean, obviously, there's always an anniversary of someone's death. I mean, that's the nature of rock and roll. It's, it was born in the 50s. It's been around a long time. Stuart Adamson was another one. Recent anniversary of his death. And lots of people thinking and not realizing he was dead because Big Country is still going.
Are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, they've got a new incarnation and original drummer, original guitarist, blah, blah, and they still roll on.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people from the outside obviously just see a band going and don't realize it isn't the original guy anymore.
Okay, and it obviously depends how old you are as well, because I was let me do my maths. I was 10 when Elvis died.
Yeah, there you go.
And that was massive. That news went on for so long, and was such a big story that hardly anyone noticed that Mark Bolan had died.
Yeah, which we never forgave Elvis for.
No, that's how long the Elvis news feed went on for, just on and on and on. And Bolan died, a few weeks later, maybe, I think.
Yeah.
So that was my first welcome to the Dead Rockstar Club, I guess. And then after that was Bolan, and then it was a long time, a really long time. I guess the first big one after that was quite some time later when Cliff Burton died.
Yes.
That made the news big time, along with Razzle. That must have been around the same kind of era.
Yeah, of course.
But they were big stories. They were big stories, and they made you care. They made you stop and go, Cliff Burton. I may detest Metallica because I'm into glam, and that's something else. But he was a person, and it stalled the band a little bit, and you're like, wow, this could happen to any of us. And people we were friends with were very affected by it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was a big one in that metal scene, because obviously at that point they were emerging into the force that they eventually did become in the early 90s. But they were certainly starting to knock on doors, definitely starting to rise ranks, and it was a big shot. And I guess, again, similar to Randy Rhoads, when Randy died with Ozzy, I guess similar to that it was quite a shocking death in the way it happened.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the bigger story as well. When you find out how it happened, it's like Scott Weiland, dying. God bless him. And, we all loved Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver, but it wasn't much of a surprise.
No, not really.
He lived on the edge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's, and what's really interesting about this is, apart from maybe Cliff Burton, is that all these people we're talking about are frontmen.
Yes.
All of them, nearly, without exception. when Razzle but then Razzle was different. Razzle wasn't just the drummer in Hanoi Rocks.
Like Keith Moon wasn't.
Yeah, Razzle was right up front there.
Yeah.
Very strange. But most of them have been front.
Or John Entwistle, from a bassist point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, as a bass player in The Who, you've only got to listen to that output, after he died, and, he's missing in action, and you can hear that he's missing in action.
Yeah. So, and it would be interesting to at this point to sort of have someone 10 years older than us and 10 years younger than us, because I bet their perspectives would be very different. I mean, somebody dies today, it's a news feed, 100 people tweet about it, and they really want to be the first. Oh, hey, this person died, and then they feel like that's their job done, that they announced it first on Twitter. Or I quite often get, and then they move on and get on with their day. But it certainly didn't used to be like that.
But I guess we're getting to the crux of the matter here in relevance and, again, where you are at the time into what they mean to you. Again, I'm very much presuming that if you're young and a modern artist passes away, it's going to have as much an effect on you as Mark Bolan did or anything on us. Because
if it was Harry Styles tomorrow morning,
that
would be a big deal, right?
Yeah, because you've invested a lot of time, in that artist. So I don't think it really changes. I think it's just what when I was thinking about it, I was obviously then thinking about the relevance in terms of, Charlie Pride recently dying. Country star, and going back and listening to some of his tracks and rediscovering it. But remembering that I was only really aware of him because my dad was a massive country fan. Sorry, nearly went wrong there. And so, I kind of was not. I always heard it. It was always on, So whether a lot of that stuff and when my dad was going to gigs, he'd often have a spare ticket and a spare seat, and I'd go along just because why not? What else was there? We're talking about a time when there was 3 TV channels and not much else to do. So I'd go and see people like that just to check them out and see what they were like, which was great a lot of the time because I got to see a lot of artists probably that I never ever would have got close to, because I certainly wouldn't have gone to see Dolly Parton and Johnny Cash and all that lot because I was too busy, listening to my music. But what it reminded me of was the time when my dad would listen to Charlie Pride and would tell me stories and tell me about his background and growing up and his life and would paint this picture of an artist that again pre-net days I didn't know nothing about that the Deep South and racism and all this kind of jazz. And so it suddenly brought that entire story back to me, and I was surprised. I was kind of like, wow, I remember being told that. So even though him as an artist, I could probably listen to the greatest hits and probably recognize maybe his five biggest hits. Yeah. But his resonance was through times and stories and events. And that's what the Dead thing got me thinking of when you were listening to the radio or watching the TV, whether it was the Tube or the Ugly Whistle Test or Top of the Pops or whatever it happened to be. It doesn't matter. Or going out to a great gig or a club or whatever, and being introduced to acts that you never really would ever have listened to had that not been around, and then they do become relevant in your life because of the times. I don't know if I'm making sense with that. Like we just talked about ECT with the time it was relevant. Out and about, getting drunk, and doing all the things you do at that age. And I guess they're soundtrack. I mean, they're soundtracks, aren't they?
Yeah, and the thing with soundtracks is they're very, very individual. Like you talk about Charlie Pride, I would talk about Charlie Rich. That was what I got brought up on, with 8 tracks in the car. You know, which is very, very similar. I think Charlie Rich is still alive, isn't he? I'm not sure. I'd have to go and check.
Yeah, with the modern age of Google,
Yep.
you know what I mean? I don't know. I know Charlie Daniels recently died, and the devil did indeed go down to Georgia.
He did.
But I don't know about Charlie Rich. But it just shows you, doesn't it, that relevance, and that's what I was trying to tap into in many respects. That whether it's Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift, who are obviously still going, Dua Lipa, huge stars. You know, if something happens to them, you know, those
you're at the level of
their memories that we're talking about, are the artists that we're talking about.
Yeah. You know, those people are like at the level of John Lennon and Kurt Cobain. They would have that kind of effect.
Yeah. And Kurt's another interesting one, because Kurt brings me on to me. This is the other side of it in a way. You talked about Prince before, and I was reminded of Prince because my partner had never seen Purple Rain, so we sat down and we put the DVD on, and I was, by the end of it, I will gladly admit I was in floods of tears, because I was like, oh my God.
It's 1984.
And I'll never see him again, you know, and you know, and all the gigs I went to see in the round or whatever. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, I'll never see him again. And I kind of started to think to myself about people like Prince and Kurt Cobain. What kind of music would they be doing now? You know, where would they have gone? Do you know what I mean? Where would, especially someone like Kurt, because obviously, you know, 20-year gap, died at the height of grunge, never really had the opportunity to morph into anything else.
Yep.
And I start to think about where I would imagine they would have fitted in the modern age. And then I switch it on myself and I ask myself the question, would they have made it in the modern age? You know, would a radio station have played Smells Like Teen Spirit had been released recently? And I kind of know.
You know, I'll throw into that arena as well. If Kurt hadn't died and the next Nirvana album had sucked, and the one after it had sucked as well, then it would have cheapened the whole thing. You know, Teen Spirit might have been great, but 3 albums on, you're nothing. You know, and they would have become the equivalent of, I don't know. You pick a pop band, Bros. Because they've got a documentary out that I happened to watch, it'd have been just another Luke Goss.
Yeah. Or maybe you wouldn't wait for it to come around again, you know. And it's funny, I've been listening to a lot of the new or the written, maybe not new, but certainly the recent 2020 output from Billy Corgan and his updated incarnation of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
And you know, Billy's certainly in that place where, you know, the Pumpkins rose. They were, you know, playing huge arenas and were massive. And then everybody fell out of love with it. Music changed. Yep. It went away and, you know, we're playing clubs to 300 people. And now he's come back, brand new direction, you know, really, really great new material, and starting to part waves again and starting to reconnect with the world, and reconnecting with a world that's kind of remembering how good they were in the first place.
Yeah, the problem with the Pumpkins is the reason that I love them, which is for your average fan, I guess. They have way too much output, just so prolific that you can't hang your hat on anything. There's not an album of 9 tracks and you go, oh, that's my favorite, and listen to it forever. There's so much Pumpkins material, you just can't get hold of anything. You know, they're great songs, and their standout songs are probably really quite early on.
Yes, of course.
But because he's a proper artist and he just keeps putting it out, and it's all quality. Where the hell do you stop? You know, you don't go, oh, I'll really listen to this Pumpkins album hard, because there won't be another one for 8 years. But that's wrong, because there bloody will be.
Yeah.
You know, either that or a solo album or a spin-off project. you know. So yeah, Billy's a weird one for me.
Yeah, and he came. I mean, and he does. I mean, you know, going off subject a little bit, but I mean, he doesn't care. You know, he came out to. You know, I was lucky enough to interview him a couple of times. Obviously, when with the band was in their prime and doing some radio interviews. But he came to a couple of Alarm shows when we were on the road, and he's a massive fan. And he just turned up, and just used to turn up and come in and stand at the side of the stage and watch and quite weird in a way. You know what I mean? And then, you know, somebody would recognise him and he'd come and jam on a song at the end and sometimes wouldn't. But chatting to him and, you know, talk to him about it, and he was never bothered. He was kind of like, look, you know, I was in a band, we were on MTV, we sold a lot of records. We had our, you know, as Andy Warhol says, our 15 minutes of fame. And he said that it enabled me to have a life that I could just live that life how I want to live it and make music when I want to, and I don't. Which again, I think is you know, it's that's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I do think that I guess that, you know, those people that did die, you know, that would. I guess the thing I start to think to myself is, could Kurt have ridden it out? You know, could he have gone through that? And I think there's lots of artists that couldn't go through the lean days. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, Michael Hutchence is a great example of that, who suffered badly from when INXS, you know, started. Their stars started to wane and they started to play smaller places, and he found it very, very difficult to deal with.
I'd find it very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I would. I mean, I can, you know, and you too, probably, because we've done, you know, for anyone who doesn't know us, Jay used to be the DJ at the Crazy House in Liverpool, and recently I was editor of Skin Deep. And when your sales or your attendance figures start to slip, it gets you. It does get you, because even if the reason was there was a pandemic and all the shops were shut, what you automatically think is, I'm not doing as good as I was.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what's going on in Michael Hutchence's head. Obviously, to a really extreme point that you don't want to put up with it anymore.
Absolutely.
But then, you know, there's that flip side. If John Lennon hadn't died, I think the Beatles would have got back together at some point.
Yes.
And then that would have cheapened the legacy. You know, the fact that, and mega respect to Robert Plant for this, for not pulling Zeppelin back together properly, as it were. You know, they stumbled a bit and had a few tribute things for no reason at all. But, you know, once Bonham had gone, it was over for Robert Plant, and that was like, that's that. And I think if they'd gone on, you know, with any drummer, it would have cheapened the legacy. You know?
Absolutely.
But if George Harrison had been shot instead of John Lennon, I don't think it would have mattered as much. And I'm sorry, but, you know, that's...
Yeah.
It would still be John and Paul. And, you know, they'd have gone on, maybe, do things together. It's a peculiar thing to look at. You know, I may be wrong.
No, I mean, I think, wow. I mean, that's a completely interesting concept to think of the Who continuing, you know, with Kenny from the Faces, and if that had been Roger Daltrey,
it would have been over.
Yeah, we're on a different dynamic, aren't we? We are on a completely different. Yeah. Wow.
You know, it's you and me are big Kiss fans, you know, and as much as everyone kind of goes, "Oh, it's not Kiss without Ace and Peter." If Gene or Paul die, it's over.
Yeah.
At any point in time, from 74 to now, it's over. Yeah. I don't care what you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, I guess in that George Orwell thing, some animals are more equal than others. You might be a band, but, you know, there's figureheads and stuff. Like if Dave Grohl had died in Nirvana,
absolutely,
that would have affected them not at all, probably.
Well,
I mean, they had a drum.
they'd had another drummer before. So
Yeah, exactly. You know, they'd have just gone and found another, or maybe split up and just left it as it was. But it would have
yeah,
been a completely different dynamic.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah, and I mean, just going back to the Michael Hutchence In Excess thing. I think again something that I was reminded because during the last 12 months there was a 4K re-rendering of their legendary Wembley show from
Right.
1991, which came out on Blu-ray and blah 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 and everything you can imagine. And I got hold of a copy and was watching it, and I was really, really knocked out by how great a band they were. And then
I never saw them, did you?
Yeah, I was at that Wembley show, and
Okay.
I was lucky enough to see him in the Royal Court in Liverpool as well, on a small kind of level. But it made me kind of not only remind me of the day and watching them and being at the show, but also it made me think, oh, I'd love to go see them now. I mean, I don't go out. It's going to sound this is going to sound really, really terrible when I say that. I'm not bothered about going out to a lot of gigs anymore because I really, really did see everybody I was really, really bothered about. Which sounds such an arsehole thing to say, but I don't mean it in them terms.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I went to see Kiss because I wanted to take my daughter. I went to see Alice again for the millionth time because it was a gift.
Yes.
You know, those kind of things. But and I know I'd have a good time. But if someone said, in fact, there's some weird stuff. You know, there's the Hollywood Brats played in London sometime last year.
Wow.
And I thought, God, I must go and see the Hollywood Brats. And I'm kind of getting ready to get on the train and grab a ticket because there was a few left because nobody cares. And I thought, hang on a minute. They're like 75, 76.
Yeah.
They've got to be in their 70s. And
Yeah.
I just turned the car around and came home and thought, no, that's not right, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, that it was just wrong.
It sounds terrible, but I was the same with the Last Great Dreamers, or whatever, or whatever they called, Last of the Teenage Idol, whatever the hell they're called. And they sent me an invitation to go and see them. And it was only down the road. And you know what? I was just sitting there thinking, do you know what? It really, really isn't the mid-'80s anymore. And you're probably, I'm probably not going to stand there, be drinking, thinking it's funny, having a laugh, and looking at girls more than I'll be looking at the band. Which was
not that there would be any there.
There was the obvious reason for going to any gig in Stairways was to drink beer and chase women. The fact that there might have been the Dogs D'Amour might have been on, was a bonus, but in reality, So
in reality, we were 20.
Yeah. But that does make me think that it sounds terrible to kind of to say that I don't say I'm sitting here kind of going I'm never going to go and see a band again because
no, not at all.
I want to see it dead.
No, but you kind of have to. I don't know. It has to be. I don't know when we used to go and see the Dogs D'Amour, and we went a lot. I can't think of a band that I've seen more, to be honest, because they were so good.
Yes.
It's not 1988 anymore.
No.
And even if they got back together, the whole chemistry and the dynamic is just not what it was because you join something because you feel like you're going forward with them.
Yeah.
And we did with in those club days there was the Dogs and the Choir Boys and that was it. But we went to a lot of those things because they were our age.
Let's get it out the way, shall we? This won't be the first time you'll hear this statement. That's because we always wanted to be in Kiss and never want to be in Thunder.
Yeah, totally.
That's why we never went to see a lot of those other bands, or when we did, we were certainly at the bar or doing something else.
Yeah, so, it's that whole. I was never interested in, if you look like a pub band gone with some original numbers, whatever. Join the very long list of others.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, you've opened the lid on there'll certainly be a future cast on why did we buy so many records? Because the band looked great on the cover.
Yeah,
because
totally.
because the vinyl inside, let's say, was often not as good as the way they looked.
Yeah, yeah. But there's in the whole dead rock star thing. I don't know. It's kind of sad. Some of them I felt sorry for. Some of them I really didn't care one way or the other. I guess occasionally I might have thought, you bought and paid for that death.
Yeah, yeah.
It just depends where you come from. But I can't. I'm not sure many of them would shock me anymore. I'm a huge Cornell fan, and that touched me beyond. And I think that touched me beyond anything else was because he's kind of my age. He's got kids.
Yeah.
He'd come out of a band. He seemed very human. He'd come out of Soundgarden. And I very much connected with him on that. Is just me in an acoustic telling my story thing. It was very close, and he did that on purpose. He got close to people, but a lot of artists never do. I think that's what Lennon did. Lennon got close to you. I think if McCartney had died instead of Lennon, he was a different kind of artist. It wasn't you never related to McCartney lyrics. He didn't write them in the same way. John wrote from the heart. McCartney wrote great songs, as far as I can see.
Yeah, from the pocket, and mostly the back pocket with the wallet in. Yeah, true.
Yeah. And I'm not dismissing his legacy. I just don't think they were the same kind of people.
Yeah, love Wings.
Yeah, you can't cry over never hearing Michael Jackson write another song because, as far as I know, he didn't write any.
Yeah, that's a valid point. That's a very valid point. But where I came from when we were talking about things and we were just chatting about the world and everything else we were talking about, what brought me to this point was I'd spent that day and I'd listened to a lot of people that were dead. I mean, I can't envisage a time in my life when I'm never going to want to listen to Bowie or Prince or Thin Lizzy or whoever that But on that particular day, a lot of the artists I'd listened to were either dead and non-existent or had a member like Big Country or whatever that had died, and it just made me suddenly realise that on that particular day, I was listening more to dead rock stars than I was listening to living stars. And it also made me think, you know what? I'm not really that bothered about that because they were brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's plenty of not brilliant ones that died that we don't know about.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten all. I'd
not remember. Yeah, true.
I'd forgotten all about Phil, didn't. If you'd said name a list of 40 rock stars that died, I would have probably forgotten Phil, and that would be a shame. But not top of my list there. Weird.
Yeah. And again, and on that day, I'd listened quite a bit to UFO because obviously in the last year, Phil Mogg died, and Pete Way, sorry, so much as the singer.
Funnily enough, I was gonna bring that up as well. When Pete Way died, I sometimes go walking the dog with I meet a couple of guys up on the hills, and they're into like Deep Purple and Sabbath. They're a little bit older than me, and I said, Pete Way, and they're like, I don't know him. I sent them away. Go home, listen to UFO. There's freaking tons of it, absolutely tons of albums, and it's all good.
Yeah.
UFO were a fantastic band.
But to me, again, he tapped into the fact that he was a character. It was the Lemmy thing with him because he was, because whenever you saw him, I don't think I ever saw him sober. I don't think I ever saw him play a gig where he was sober either. And he was always I guess the term is rock and roll. If that's drinking, doing lots of things, substances you shouldn't, and lots of things with women, defined rock and roll for me, and wanting to be in a band because you got to do that, and really you didn't get to do that if you got a proper job.
No, Pete just opened the Bon Scott book and copied it, I think.
Yeah.
But again,
again, going to that fact that that's what makes it attractive in the first place.
Yeah, totally. Is when you're young, self-destruction rules, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a good thing for you. I just booted up my Apple Music thing. I've scrolled right to the beginning of when I first started adding things.
Wow.
Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Right? I was never the biggest fan, but he certainly influenced a whole number of people. Then I got Chris Cornell, scrolling up here.
Well, you've just touched on something there, because it's got to be radically different for you, because you've just hit two things there that for me would never have an impact on me as an artist. And a difference with you, because you're a songwriter, because you're a singer, because you sit there with the acoustic guitar and you're writing your songs and you're doing what you're doing. At the end of the day, I guess your perspective from that point is going to be completely different from mine, because their influence, some of those art influence must flow through your fingers or your mind.
You get into a zone where you are doing exactly the same things that those people did.
No,
and I'm not saying you do it as well or anything or even similar, but you are effectively doing the same thing. You are trying to get something out of your head onto tape with nothing more than a guitar. Like Cohen's a big one, I guess. I never really. He's a bit. I've grown to like him in recent years.
Well, no,
I couldn't stand the guy when I was younger.
No,
couldn't stand him because it was just beyond me. It was because I was too immature.
Sit down to a Leonard Cohen album.
But in your 20s. Then you've got
no.
But then on the screen in front of me now, I've got Andrew Wood, Mother Love Bone. That was hit me hard. Lane Staley didn't hit me as hard as it should have, because again, maybe that wasn't wholly unexpected at the time. Jim Morrison, a huge one. That's probably the most famous brutal rock star death ever, right?
Yeah, and something that, and again, a death that continues to resonate.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure why.
I don't know. Again, I think tapping into the artistic thing. He was a great writer, but he was a poet as well. So I think that sinks in. I think that sinks into you more when you sit there and you read the words, and sometimes those words resonate with you more than perhaps even the band or the song, which is a unique place to be.
Yeah, and do you know the worst thing of all is, these most of these people we've mentioned were special, are special, very talented, but somewhere out there, there's people equally talented who didn't get a break or who couldn't be bothered doing it. Like we were joking with each other yesterday about being shit at things, but being shit and not doing it. And being shit and having to go anyway are two very different things.
For me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what I tapped into. Maybe you're now coming to the final bit of this this cast. But maybe that's the bit I'm getting to more than anything else. When I die, I won't leave a legacy like that. When you die, you won't. And I guess that's maybe, and that's not a regret of never ever making it, because because you try and you do what you do, and I never got to be in Kiss or play a sold out stadium. Such is life. But I guess it's that thing of me thinking to myself, it must also be nice to be remembered that way. The fact that someone can take out a piece of vinyl, can press play on the YouTube, can take out a CD, and suddenly you're back in the room. Because sometimes when I play them, they're back in the room with me because I'm back in the room with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'll never get that. And that's kind of maybe one bit that strikes me the most. Is looking at Chris Cornell's daughter's material, and she started to finally come out, let people see her talent. No matter what happens, she can always go home and drop the needle and hear her dad's voice. My kids won't get that.
And there we must leave it, mostly because we actually had to go through the motions to discover we could only do an hour using Anchor as a delivery system, so we certainly learned something there. Next time we'll be more organised, but I hope you enjoyed it all the same. For more details and points of contact, you can check out the show notes in the description, and aside from that, subscribe and tell your friends if you like it, and I'll see you next time. Be cool to each other.